What's going on, guys? SeeJay here, and in today's video I wanted to do a deep dive and a tier list on all the glyphs currently in the game. Let's dive into it. Alright guys, so in today's video I had fun making the tier list I made a few days ago, and I wanted to do another one which is going to dive into each of the glyphs. So we have 9 currently in the game. I think when I mentioned it in one of my other videos I wasn't really exactly sure how many we had. I thought it was like 10 or 11, but it's actually 9 glyphs currently that exist in Heroes of Middle-earth. So looking at it on my screen now, and then I'll kind of swap over to the tier list maker and sort of put them in order of what I think is your S tiers, which probably most of you guys know what are the S tiers, and then sort of your F tier if there are any. So we'll kind of dive into that. But for starters, just kind of on my screen, just kind of showcasing, you know, the glyph management screen, and kind of looking at the 9 that do exist in the game. What I did is I grabbed the glyph emblem, you know, so like this guy here, for sort of my tier list maker. I wasn't sure the best way, like, you know, you look at this and unless like this game's been around for a long time and you just kind of like naturally know what each of the emblems are, I don't even know them, right? Like this one I kind of know a shield wall because it looks like a shield, so it's kind of easy to remember. But just for the sake of the video, I'm going to go in alphabetical order to make it easiest, and at the end when I do like a recap, maybe I can just kind of like make sure even I know where I put them all. But anyway, so Armor Piercer is the first one we're going to kind of dive into, and it's obviously sort of like a sideways A, so just kind of keep that in mind. Bloodlust kind of is like that L shape, right, for lust, so a little bit easy to kind of remember. Last Stand, I don't know what the hell that is, so that one's, it looks cool, but I mean like an L-ish with like a, I don't know. Anyways, Last Stand. Lembus, again, another tough one to kind of look at and say, yep, I have something that explicitly tells me that that's Lembus. Lifestealer, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really look like a heart, but for me, just the best way I'll remember. Raider's easy to remember because it's just kind of like the 2 axes, right? So Raider. Shield Wall, again, looks like a shield. Vitality actually kind of looks like a heart too. So that's sort of tough because I was just saying that this one doesn't look like a heart, but a way for me to remember, like, what is the lifesteal emblem? But now that the Vitality is actually kind of like an open heart. And then Withering, you know, kind of looks like a W. So not that that really matters, but I used the glyph emblem, you know, so if that's helpful for anyone as like you're trying to kind of follow along on my tier list, that's sort of what approach I took when grabbing the 9 glyphs and then kind of diving into it. So let's go ahead and go to the tier list maker. So on the tier list maker, as you can see, here's your 9 glyphs, again, in alphabetical order. And I have a little bit of cheat sheet here for myself, so that way I can also remember. But we'll just go in alphabetical order to keep things easy, right? So the first one we have here is Armor Piercer. And so Armor Piercer, what it does is it's 2% armor piercing damage, and it's a set of 2. So you can technically stack this 3 times, get up to 6% armor piercing damage, which is honestly pretty good. I think this is one of the better sets. Obviously, it's not going to fall S tier unless I had like an SSS plus tier for some of the other couple of glyphs in the game that are just much stronger than others, right? But Armor Piercer, you know, it is conditional because if the enemy is lacking armor or has a low level of armor, then it doesn't serve as much, you know, damage, right? Like it's based off the armor of the opponent, whether it be PvP or in PvE. So it is a little bit conditional, but everything has armor in the game for the most part, right? Like I don't think there's anything in the game that has 0 armor, so you're always going to get some value. The value is just going to swing depending on how much armor said character actually does have, right? So a perfect example of this one coming into play that I think is decent is the Cave Troll, right? You know, if you can kind of break like in difficulty 3, that 3000 armor threshold, you know, you can really start to see the Armor Piercer value ramp up. And then difficulty 4 is going to be like 3.5k, maybe a little less than that. But, you know, obviously as difficulties increase, like the armor penetration required is going to go up. But I would say this one's actually a pretty good set. It's definitely not S tier, but I would say that Armor Piercer is probably easily an A tier glyph that we currently have in the game, and the way it's designed, especially since it's a set of 2. It's pretty flexible to be a set of 4 glyph with a set of 2, or 3 sets of 2 and just including like 1 or 2 of these on a character with like a third other option, right? Second or third other option, depending on if you're doing another set of 2 or 4 set. So I would say that that one is a decent set in the game the way it's currently designed. The next one we have is Bloodlust. So we've all seen videos, we all know Bloodlust is probably the best, if it's definitely the best glyph in the game. I knew when they announced the glyphs that this was going to be one of the stronger ones. I didn't know it was going to be like outright broken, because I thought they did a good design on just like the static values and the way they kind of designed the way the glyphs work, with the damage, the HP, the crit chance, the crit damage, the speed. A lot of those seem like they came out of the box in a pretty good position to not feel like any of them are way over tuned or under tuned. Like they feel pretty good the way they are, like when you're talking about the stats on the glyphs themselves. But when we're speaking specifically to the set bonuses, Bloodlust is very strong, and a huge reason for it is because turn meter means you get to attack more than your opponent, whether it's PvE or PvP, right? And it's a set of 2, so if you stack this 3 times, you are getting 90% turn meter, so essentially in another turn. So it's probably a lot better in PvE than it necessarily is in PvP, because you're not constantly killing people from a PvP perspective. It's still the best set, so you're probably going to see it on everyone you're fighting against. So I wouldn't say it's a set that you're not going to probably use anyways, or not just keep swapping between your PvE and PvP sets. But it's super good in the raids, right? Because you know, for example, chapter 2 on the topple, when he's at 25%, it allows you to fight the 2 ads, the orcs that come in, and you can sort of take them down and get quick turns to be able to also finish off the cave troll, to allow you to get that additional points for that raid, right, for that chapter. And then again in chapter 3 you can kind of do some cheese with all the waves and the bloodlust and kind of getting almost endless turns, so that's really good. I mean, especially in difficulty 3, not so much past that. And then, you know, chapter 4 is just not good, right? Like chapter 4 doesn't serve as much purpose, but there's not a lot that does a whole much value. Balrog is just a really tough chapter, a really tough raid boss. But it doesn't perform as well, of course, in the other chapters. But it's still, at the end of the day, the best glyph in the game. So that's certainly saying without a doubt that it's definitely the best. This next one, sorry, I gotta bounce over here because I actually already forgot what it was. Last Stand. Okay, so Last Stand is our next glyph. Now this is already kind of pushing some of the better glyphs in the game at the top of my tier list based off alphabetical order. So I didn't plan it that way. It's just sort of the way it's kind of standing true. But Last Stand is if you drop below 25% HP, then you gain 100% turn meter. You get 3 Banes Dispelled and 1 stamina regen. It is a set of 4. So it's, you know, it's the first one out of these couple we've gone over that does require a 4 set, which means you are losing the ability to have 3 2 sets on, which you might in most cases see like a full 3 set Armor Piercer, a full 3 set Bloodlust, and then the other mix match you're going to see 90% of the time, if it's not 3x Bloodlust, is going to be Bloodlust plus Last Stand. And Last Stand is just so good, right? Like it is actually one of the better sets in chapter 4 to trigger, because when you do drop below 25% health, what's better than having like multiple things kind of happen on your character, right? You're getting that turn meter, which you get to go, you're getting those Banes Dispelled, you're getting that stamina regen. Like there's just so much value on this specific glyph. It's really, really good. I would say it wouldn't be something you're using a lot of the times on your DPS characters, but it's really good to have on a support character or like a bruiser tank character. I think those type of characters in the game are going to find most value to have Last Stand equipped on them as one of your sets. So for me, this is easily another it's easily another S tier glyph in the game. So the next one is going to be, I'm pretty sure here, Lembas. I'm just kind of looking at my notes, and I think it's the only other next one if an alphabetical or an L. So let's go with Lembas. So Lembas here is also a pretty good one. I don't know if it's better than Armor Piercer, and it's certainly not S tier level, but what it does is you're gonna get a stamina, one box of stamina on a wave start, and after you use your first ability in a wave, you get the stamina build up, right? It is another set of 4, so it's a costly set in the sense that you're getting this value in exchange for the inability to have 3 sets on rather than just the 2 sets that you could have equipped on your character. This one is good for characters that don't start with full stamina and have long cooldowns, right? It's something that you want to try and get your biggest impactful ability up and running as soon as possible. And this one comes to mind, especially in PvP, especially on Elrond, because Elrond, if you have the 4 set of Lembas and you got your abilities kind of maxed out and whatnot, this allows you to be able to do a turn 1 wave, which is really, really, really strong. And it's probably what you're going to see a lot of the times from enemies that you're playing against, that they're running Elrond with Lembas to get the first turn wave. So keep that in mind when you're in PvP setting. But Lady Eowyn is another one, just because she has her special too, which is the break the cage that comes with that disable and cleanse. So that's really, really good to have as a turn 1 option instead of having to wait for that for the second turn. Tabeb comes to mind as another character. So generally speaking, again, this one's pretty good on like support based characters, probably not as often on a DPS. But again, the way that I kind of think about Lembas is like, do I have a character that I'm just like dying to use that big time ability that's one of their specials, and it's normally on a long cooldown? Is there a way to kind of get that one a little bit quicker? That's sort of how I view Lembas. So Lembas to me is as good as Armor Piercer, but maybe even like an edge ahead of Armor Piercer. So I'm going to put it at the top of A. But they're easily exchangeable between Armor Piercer and Lembas here. So off the get-go, sorry, my dogs are in this room. Off the get-go, the first 4 out of the 9 that we're looking at, they've all been at the top of the top of the tier list. So interesting that the alphabetical order has kind of pushed it in that direction. But as we kind of continue sort of diving through this, our next one up, I believe, is Lifestealer. And so Lifestealer is absolute dog. It's the worst set in my opinion in the game. It's borderline if you get any of these by just running some campaign nodes or whatever, like just literally sell them if you need gold until they rework it and give it a significant bump and buff or rework. It doesn't really serve much of any purpose. It's completely useless. And you guys can let me know in the comments below if there's something that you figured out on how Lifestealer actually gives any value to have on a character in the game. But from what I've seen so far, it's completely worthless. So even if you 3x, because this is a set of 2 and it gives you 2% lifesteal. So even if you 3x'd it, you get 6% lifesteal, right? Which sounds like, oh, that's actually not the worst, right? Let's think about it. If you did a big AoE, right? And you hit everybody for 10,000 damage, which I don't even know if there's an AoE that can hit for that much, but let's just pretend for a second you hit everybody for 10,000 damage. So you did 50,000 damage, right? Well, 6% of 50,000 damage is what? 3,000? So for a big time AoE attack, you're going to get 3,000 HP back. And most characters who are probably even coming close to hit something like that have well over 40,000 health. So you're getting like less than 10% health in return on probably a longer cooldown attack. We're not talking a basic that's hitting one guy for 6k, 5k, which is going to give you back what, 300 health? Like, useless, absolutely useless. This needs to be significantly bumped up to have any value in the game. So we'll see what they do there again when they're looking at some of these and some potential tuning that we might even see as early as next week when we get hopefully finally somewhere from SeeJay after a few weeks of kind of being on holiday. The next one up is Raider. So Raider, again, double axes, kind of easy to remember. So Raider is like another pretty bad one. Raider, yeah. So what it is it's kind of similar to Armor Piercer, right? So you could argue that Armor Piercer and Raider could kind of fall around the same level of value, but the reason I kind of weigh Raider much lower than Armor Piercer is because of the condition of the 2% damage is only applied if the target is over 50% health. So it is a set of 2, so it does allow you to have 3 of these, which then would give you 6% damage increase of targets over 50% health. Sounds pretty good. And in some niche cases, it might not be bad, but I don't love the condition. I'd rather 3x Armor Piercer. That'll probably net me out on average, depending on how many characters you're hitting and their armor level, you know, so you're not going to always get the same exact value per target, but at least you're getting that value from 100 to 0, no matter what. You're getting 2%, 3%, 4%, up to 6% if it's fully if you have the 3x, right? Every single hit you're getting it. Raider, you're only going to get it if they're above 50% health. So to me, that condition is much worse than a target having armor, which every target, as far as I know, is going to have some level of armor on their kit, whether it's PvP or PvE. And of course, in PvE, some of the targets have significant armor you have to penetrate, which just gives it even more value. And like one that comes to mind is like the Cave Troll, right? So the Cave Troll, you only need to get him to 25% health. And when he drops to 25% health, you don't like, that is kind of the most important part. So it's like, oh, well, you're getting that 50 to 100% value. And then you only need that other, like you're not getting like the 50-50, right? Like you're kind of just hitting that 25% threshold. So it's like, oh, there's actually more value to potentially have Raider on the Cave Troll. But then I argue it saying, but that 25% to 0 is kind of the most impactful moment of the fight, right? Because you have to think about, okay, like what orc spawned, who am I going to target? How am I going to get rid of them and or make sure I finish the topple of the Cave Troll to get him to 0 to get my points instead of letting him regen enough to stand back up, right? So I think I'd rather in that fight Armor Piercer 99 times out of 100 over Raider. And somebody can let me know if you guys tested those sets and if you had different opinions that Raider actually performs better. I haven't actually done personal testing to say Raider is way worse or better, but just from raw, you know, just numbers I've seen, I think Armor Piercer is just generally going to be a stronger candidate for that fight and just in general as a set. So for me, Raider, it's definitely not as bad as Lifestealer. Lifestealer is by far going to be your worst set in the game right now as it stands with these 9. But I would say, you know, it's still not a great set, so we'll put it in C. The next guy we got here is Shield Wall. So actually Shield Wall, in my opinion, is pretty good. It's obviously a tanking speciality, right? Like it's one you're not going to probably use on much other characters and tanks because, well, I mean, what it is a set bone. It's a 2-set bonus, and it's 3% less damage with a taunt to provoke, right? So if you're not a tank, you probably don't have a taunt to provoke, which means this serves 0 purpose for your character. I would say it's for characters that have more provoke stacks that it serves a better value than maybe some of the tanks that only have like a 2-stack instead of a 3-stack. So like Eladin is a good example that comes to mind. Aothan could be another where they have like the 3-stack provoke stacks that they can do, so they can kind of continuously take advantage of potentially having a 3 set of this and taking 9% less damage. But yeah, I would say it's a good set. Like it's an all-around pretty good damage mitigation set that could be used on your tank, and I think it's actually a pretty good set in PvP to just, again, getting your tank to be the focal point of your team and staying alive and letting your healers kind of heal them while they're taking the less damage because of Shield Wall. So for me, it's definitely a pretty decent set. It's definitely not S or A tier. It's probably borderline low A, but we'll put it in B here because we don't have a B one yet. So let's go ahead and just kind of bump it into the B tier. All right, so second to last glyph we have here to go through is going to be Vitality. So Vitality is another set of 4 bonus. So again, you don't get the luxury of having 3x applied to a character in terms of sets of 2. You got to do your set of 4 plus a set of 2. So has a little bit of stipulation there to consider on where to rank it, because it does take a slot of potentially a, you know, a 3rd set of 2 value on a character. But Vitality is crit hit. You gain regeneration stack, and you can gain up to 3 stacks on a character, right? So this one is kind of pretty niche, especially being a 4 set. But it's really good on teams that don't have a primary healer on the team and need additional ways of surviving, especially like maybe the tank, right? So for me, a perfect example is like Ugluk and the Isengard team. If you play them as a full Isengard, most of their healing output is going to be through their passive of applying Banes and getting AoE healing for the team. Although it's pretty light, it's still kind of the way that they're generating most of their heals. They do have obviously a healer, but the healer is it's just not as much heals as you kind of see on a lot of other teams. Their biggest weakness is just kind of staying alive for a long period of time, right? So with Vitality on and getting that regeneration stack, I don't know if you apply it to the whole Isengard team, but Ugluk is a really good option because Ugluk is your tank. He's provoking, he's super beefy, he hits pretty hard. He's a really good character in my opinion in the game. And with this set on him, it just gives him that next level of value in the sense of like really hard to take down because he's just constantly healing up, which is great, right? Like he's going to be able to stay alive longer and kind of keep them attacking him, which allows the rest of the Isengard team to stay alive. So I would say this is a really good option. Again, kind of on like a tank off tank sort of character, probably not on many other characters. But it's a pretty good set. Like I think this one comes into play as well as in potentially PvP because regeneration, again, if you have that on a character, it's just really annoying to kind of keep seeing them getting that additional heals every single turn because they're probably getting crit hitted and they're getting healed up. And then you can have up to 3 stacks of it. So, you know, you can really see the impact every turn as you're doing damage to them and then they're healing up, right? And then they're already not taking a lot of damage, especially if it's the tank. So it's pretty frustrating. I played against a couple of teams where like I do damage. I'm trying to take them down because I want to get that tank out of the way so I can focus somebody else. But then they just keep regenerating health. So it's like every time I do damage, it's kind of just being nullified. And it's like now you're against the timer because the timer is such a problem in PvP with the constant provoking on a lot of teams that you're running into in the arena mode. So kind of annoying. But yeah, I would say Vitality is actually a pretty okay set. I'd probably put it low B, high C. You know, it could kind of fluctuate in between either one of those two rankings in my opinion, but I would say Vitality's not bad. And then the last one we have here is Withering. So Withering is when you inflict a Bane, you deal 15% true damage. Again, set of 4, so it has that negative kind of hit that it needs to be a very, very good set because you're losing the ability to have 3 on. So this one's again, like, I feel like I mentioned Isengard a lot here as examples, but Isengard again comes to mind because they apply Banes, and some of them are pretty hard hitters, like Ashak comes to mind. So the true damage is going to look at their static baseline DPS raw numbers. So if you're looking at a ranking from like top to bottom every character in the game, the better the damage output, the stronger this becomes because of that true 15% damage. But keep in mind, again, it's only if a Bane is inflicted, so not a lot of the top damage dealers are inflicting Banes. But if we wanted to like actually think of a character outside of Isengard, Rockma comes to mind. I don't have him built out, so I don't know if this is like super strong on him or if there's a better set that would just be better. But looking at his kit, he's got a lot of that burning abilities and they're AoEs, right? So Blasting Fire is a big AoE burn, and then you could follow that up with Putrid Gas, which is a big AoE increased DPS. I think it's like 120%, maybe even more with the ability upgrades that does additional damage based off burning enemies. So if you kind of did 1 into 2, you're gonna do a lot of damage because not only are you getting that increased damage output on Putrid Gas ability because of just this natural increased DPS based off burning characters, but you're also have the Bane up, right? So like they're gonna just take more damage in addition because of this this set on. So Rockma is a character that comes to mind. There's probably others out there that anyone that can realistically apply consistent Banes is going to see value out of this, but it's pretty niche. It's not going to be something you're going to put on a lot of characters because it requires a specific something to happen to get the value, whereas you just have naturally other things that don't require necessarily damage increase on a specific situation to occur, i.e. Armor Piercer. Yes, it requires armor, but like everything has armor, so you're always getting a net damage increase output versus I need to apply a Bane, or a Bane has to be on the character and not dispelled or cleansed or whatever in order for me to get the value out of this specific set. And being a 4 set, I mean, it needs to be really good, right? So like another note I have is it could be a solid choice to run because the amount of Banes being applied, again, like we kind of talked about, but generally it's only good with ones that maybe have like AoE Banes, and again, a very high damage raw stat line, to just see the full value and DPS increase out of that true damage increase on the set. So for me, I'd probably put this one like, you know, probably high C. I don't think I'd put it B. So let me know what you guys think. I thought it'd be kind of fun to go through the sets here. I think we all know S tier and far and above all the other glyphs in the game is going to be your Bloodlust and your Last Stand. Like those are going to be on 90% of your characters, 90% of the time, hardly ever swapping those off. Your follow-ups could be your Lembus set, because it's really good to have on like your classes that you want to get those big time abilities out earlier. And then your Armor Piercer, because Armor Piercer just kind of works most of the time, or if not all the time, in some value. Again, it's going to fluctuate. Even if you have a 3, you know, even if you have all 6 on, you're getting that 6% damage, or, you know, 3, the full 2 set times 3 for 6% increase. You're not always going to see 6% increase. It's really going to depend on just what you're fighting against and what their armor values are. But it's still just a natural DPS increase, which is just great to have. And then as you kind of work down the list from here, a lot of these just kind of become a lot more niche and situational and character specific. And then as you get to your like low C and D tier that we kind of have here, those are just like, they're not good. Like Raider, in my opinion, is borderline right there with Lifestealer, but Lifestealer is far and away the worst set in the game, and you're just never going to use it, at least in its current state. So anyways, let me know what you guys think. I hope you liked the video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.